G'day, I'm Guy Allen. Welcome to Motorcycle TV. The toy we're playing with today, BMW's R1200R. Now this is kind of the base model in the Boxer range, and it goes as close as BMW gets to a plain Jane motorcycle. That said, of course, you've got the latest Boxer twin, which means the 4-valve heads, 110 horsepower, weighs at just over 230 kilos dripping wet, that's right, with fuel on board, and it's got a lot of electronics on board. We're talking heated grips, we have fuel injection, we have ABS, we have traction control. I'm sure if you looked hard enough you'd find somewhere to put the kettle too. But the idea behind the bike is it's meant to be a bare bones bike. What about the power? 110 horsepower, not a huge amount these days, but really is more than enough to get this thing herring along at a pretty good rate. It's the one thing you won't be short of on this bike. Brakes are responsive, they're strong, you've got the ABS safety net there, no complaints. Gearbox, look, it's typical BMW twin. It's not the slickest thing out there, but it's okay. It's easy enough to change, it's accurate, and the shaft drive is pretty unobtrusive. So overall, the powertrain works well. There's an 18-litre tank on board. That means you've got a pretty healthy range. Overall layout of controls and switches is just fine. BMW's had plenty of practice of this. Of course, it's got the typical 3-switch indicator system, which is a bit of a quirky thing that BMW is stuck with for a long time, but really that's the only thing that's really out of the ordinary on this motorcycle. Everything else is pretty much instinctive. Typical of BMW, there are a ton of accessories available for this thing, not least of which is luggage, and that's really the most obvious one. Panniers are a good thing to get while the bike's new. BMW makes a very good set that mounts and dismounts easily enough. It'll probably cost a bit, but long term it'll also probably add value to the bike. So this bike is going to have a competitor within its own range, which is the R9T, which is a super retro based in theory, or at least harking back to the classic R90s of years gone by. This bike is more of a plain Jane all-rounder, if you like. Typically for BMW though, this has a somewhat minimalist feel when you're on the bike. It's a big Boxer, not heavily stressed. You're doing about 3,400 RPM at 100 kilometres an hour. But at the same time, you've got all this electronic wizardry underneath you to make sure that if you do have to pull up in a hurry or something else goes wrong, you've at least got a pretty good fighting chance of getting it all under control again. Something I should mention too is this bike has electronic suspension adjustment on board as standard. Now BMW typically loads up a lot of these bikes with lots of extras like that. The electronic suspension adjustment might seem something of a gimmick, but believe it or not, I actually think it's quite a useful thing. You can literally drop a pillion off or put one on, no tools involved, and you can adjust it very, very quickly. Very simple system, I've got a lot of time for it. Overall, the bike is just a nice, big, easy-going, do-anything kind of bike. You can commute on it. It's a fairly big machine, but you can get varying seat heights for it. It's not a tall seat on this bike, but you can get varying seat heights for this whole series. Out on the open road is really where it's at its best. It's very relaxing, sips at fuel, sort of high teens per litre. If you get it onto a twisty road, very easy to throw around. Big wide handlebars, lots of leverage, lovely suspension on it. The suspension errs on the side of plush. It is meant to be a road bike after all, but you might be surprised at just how quickly you are going on this bike. You've got the single-sided monoshock on the back, of course, with shaft drive, so all very low maintenance. Up front you've got BMW's telelever, which is unique to that manufacturer. Been around a long time, or part of the intention of it is to get a little bit of separation between braking and steering forces, but particularly provide an anti-dive effect on the front, and it's quite effective at that. When you jump on the brakes with this thing, it may dip a little, but not necessarily as much as you would get with a conventional fork, particularly given the fairly plush settings on this one and the long travel. Overall, as a setup, it works very nicely on the road. So all up, I've got a lot of time for it. Easy going, big road bike. That pretty much sums it up. Okay, now for the kicker, $20,000 and $800. That's right, $20,800 plus on-road costs. So it's not exactly cheap, but as I said, BMW typically has loaded it up with features. Worth it? Depends on what you think of the spinning propeller logo and the brand that stands behind it. It's one of those bikes I think would last you a hell of a long time and would do pretty much anything. So if you're in the market for a big all-rounder naked bike, well worth a look. Look for the full test in Motorcycle Trader magazine.